We are halfway through the month of August, and the Dylan Larkin situation in Detroit has not been resolved. So it's probably time for Don Sweeney to pick up the phone and revisit this option.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans? Welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren. Today is Friday, August 14th, and on this episode, we are discussing the Dylan Larkin situation. The Hockey News' Adam Proteau put out a piece the other day identifying center depth as the Boston Bruins' single biggest area of concern entering the upcoming season. Not exactly breaking news. The Bruins, of course, still have Pavel Zacha coming off a career-high 30-goal, 65-point season. Elias Lindholm, Fraser Minten, Sean Kuraly in the mix. And, of course, potential first-line center James Hagens making his full-time arrival at the NHL level. Head coach Marco Sturm still needs a dynamic 200-foot engine to drive neutral zone transition, line matching. While Zacha and Lindholm offer solid structure, that middle of the ice group is not powerful enough to serve in a grueling Atlantic division. So we're going to touch on the Dylan Larkin situation, what it might cost, whether it's worth it, and if it would help them maintain a top 4 spot in the Atlantic. Also, some other options that Adam Proteau floated in his Hockey News piece that are probably not very realistic. So, as we all know by now, Dylan Larkin made a trade request from the Detroit Red Wings earlier this summer. Now, Detroit is in a transition under a new front office with Steve Yzerman kind of stepping up to a different role, vacating the general manager position, and they are looking for a new GM at the moment. Dylan Larkin's got a no movement clause, and it was reported that his preferred destinations were Minnesota, Florida, and Vegas. Boston, therefore, currently not on Larkin's reported list of preferred trade destinations. So Adam Proteau is floating Detroit to Boston as their premier target, but the main stumbling block is the fact that Boston does not seem to be currently on Larkin's reported list of preferred trade destinations. Lal Richardson of Spectors Hockey points out that Don Sweeney's logical first move, therefore, is to ask Detroit for permission to speak with Larkin and his agent to pitch Boston as a prime landing spot. There's been a lot of talk this offseason, obviously, about kind of these Team USA gang ups in certain markets. You've got Brady Tkachuk moving down to Florida to play with his brother Matthew. You have Larkin maybe wanting to go to Minnesota to play with Matt Boldy and Quinn Hughes. You've got the Vegas angle with Jack Hughes. The Bruins, of course, boast 2 players who played for Team USA on that Olympic gold medal winning team in Charlie McAvoy, Jeremy Swayman. Perhaps they could persuade Larkin to consider Boston as a potential destination. Now, Larkin, if he's not traded prior to training camp, he likely will report. A holdout is extremely unlikely. People refer to holdouts as a guy who's like a UFA not attending camp. That's not a holdout. That's just you don't have a contract yet. Whereas a holdout is you've got a contract and you just don't appear at camp. If home ice fan frustration or media distractions persist, Detroit's leverage, though, their window is narrowing, and that incentivizes a deal. Boston right now holds roughly 5.3 million in available cap space, meaning any deal for Larkin, who's got an AAV of 8.7 million, which is very reasonable in today's rising cap atmosphere. You'd have to send significant roster salary back out. Adam Proteau adds the Bruins do hold 4 first-round picks over the next 3 drafts, which is a crucial chip if Detroit is committing to a full rebuild by dealing Dylan Larkin. Now, in terms of the salary balancer choice, it's probably between Pavel Zacha versus Casey Middlestadt. Both Zacha, who's got a 4.75 million AAV, and Middlestadt, who's at 5.75, carry contracts running through this upcoming season. Both can hit UFA status in 2027. Neither would present long-term risk for Detroit. Both would serve as expiring bridge top 6 centers to try to help keep the team afloat if they trade Dylan Larkin. Moving Middlestadt would be preferable. He's got $1 million extra in cap space that he's taking up, and a lower overall skill set than Zacha. And keeping Zacha would allow Marco Sturm to roll out a potential, Larkin, Zacha, Lindholm punch down the middle, or Lindholm, Minten with Zacha on the wing, along with Dylan Larkin on the top line with JJ Peterka and David Pastrnak. Now, what would be the cost of acquiring Dylan Larkin? The baseline ask would probably be a 2027 first-round pick, a 2028 first-round pick, Fraser Minten, and the cap balancer being either Zacha or Middlestadt. Fraser Minten obviously offers an NHL-ready, high-floor, 200-foot middle 6 projection. He would be the guy that they're after, the guy that they're asking for to go along with a couple picks and to take on the salary of Pavel Zacha or Casey Middlestadt. That would be option A for Detroit. Would be the best package. Will probably be 2 first-round picks, Fraser Minten, Pavel Zacha. I'm saying a hard no to that, to be honest. But maybe you can tweak it a bit. Ideally, you could offer a lesser package that involves maybe a couple first-round picks, sure, but maybe Matt Poitras instead of Fraser Minten and Casey Middlestadt instead of Pavel Zacha. And that would be the perfect way to go in my mind. You might have to throw in an extra second-round pick in order to sweeten that a bit because it, let's be honest, is not the best package. Maybe they land in the middle where it's a couple first-round picks along with Pavel Zacha and Matt Poitras. Poitras, of course, spent most of last season in Providence, viewed as a middle 6, maybe reclamation project at the moment. Pavel Zacha represents, top NHL ready, obviously NHL prime piece in that deal to kind of offset the loss of Dylan Larkin. If you can convince them to take Poitras, Middlestadt, and a few picks, that would be a huge win for the Boston Bruins. If it's going to cost you 2 first-round picks, Fraser Minten and or Pavel Zacha, I'm saying no. I'm fine trading Pavel Zacha because he's an unrestricted free agent. He's going to command a bigger deal next summer. But Fraser Minten for me is a guy that you keep. He's not a guy that I would trade for a Dylan Larkin. It would have to be a much higher end center in that package. So those are kind of the prices that you're looking at. We're going to discuss if it's worth it, if it helps Boston stay top 4 in the Atlantic, what the other options might be according to Adam Proteau, all that here coming up as the podcast continues. Support for today's episode comes from Indeed Sponsored Jobs. When workplace chaos hits and you need the right hire, Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps connect employers with candidates who match specific needs like skills, certifications, and location. So less time gets spent searching and more time gets spent finding the right fit. People are finding quality hires on Indeed right now. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Go to Indeed.com/podcast right now. Support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on Locked On Boston Bruins. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply, but if you need to hire, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. So could the Bruins use a player like Dylan Larkin? Obviously, he is maybe not like a premier center in the NHL, but he is obviously a high-end player who brings a lot of what Boston needs to the table. He is 30 years old. He is under contract for the next 5 seasons at a very reasonable cap hit of $8.7 million. And he is a proven producer and big game player, more so on the international stage, considering he has yet to play in an NHL playoff game. And that's partly a function of, he's played in 5 playoff games with the Red Wings, 1 goal to his credit, and that was 10 years ago. That's more a roster construction thing. He has averaged 0.8 points per game for his career. Last season, 67 points in 74 games, 70 points in 82 games the year before that. A career high 79 points in 2022-23. His career high for points per game is 1.01 in 2023-24. The Bruins don't have a center right now who's anywhere near capable of averaging a point per game. So it's very well worth it. And he's a 200-foot player. He can play big minutes, over 20 minutes per night. He can play on the power play. He can help kill penalties. He had a shorthanded goal last season, 8 for his career. This is exactly the type of guy the Bruins need and who can elevate this team to contention in a very tough Atlantic division. The question is what you're willing to give up to get him. Are you willing to give up 2 first-round picks, Pavel Zacha and Fraser Minten? Maybe not. Are you willing to give up 2 first-round picks, Pavel Zacha and Matt Poitras? Probably. Are you willing to give up 3 picks, 2 firsts, a second, as well as Poitras and Middlestadt? I would say definitely. Larkin brings two-way leadership, prototypical 200-foot top-line center, excels in high-leverage situations, drives possession, wins key faceoffs. He's got elite skating speed, transports the puck through the neutral zone, high-end motor. Put him with David Pastrnak, JJ Peterka, and you have one of the most lethal top lines in the NHL. He's a reliable 30-goal, 70-point threat. And even at 30 years of age, 30 years old, he still aligns squarely with the prime windows of David Pastrnak, Charlie McAvoy, and Jeremy Swayman. And his $8.7 million AAV represents manageable, fair value, more than fair value for a true number one center in a rising cap environment, even for his age 30 to 35 years. Last season, Boston finished fourth in the Atlantic with 100 points, behind Buffalo, Tampa, and Montreal, and just ahead of Ottawa. You know that Florida is going to be making a run again this season. Toronto is hoping to be much improved. The Bruins will enter the year in a tight dogfight with Ottawa, Buffalo, Tampa, Florida, Ottawa. Did I say them already? Fourth, fifth place in the Atlantic Division and a wild card spot. Standing pat with Zacha, Lindholm. That puts the center position, which is already vulnerable, behind a lot of those other teams and at immediate risk of sliding down into the bottom of the division. Right now, I see only Detroit as the surefire worst team this season. I could make an argument for Ottawa or Toronto to remain down there. But with Larkin, Boston upgrades from a serviceable center group with Zacha, Minten, Lindholm, Corrali to a pretty high-end center group, if you keep Zacha, that is, with Larkin, Zacha, Lindholm, and Sean Corrali. And that's the potential also of putting Zacha on the wing where he has played in the past with Fraser Minten, or putting Lindholm on the wing, shifting him in key situations as well. Fraser Minten does have high-end center capabilities, as does James Hagens. But the reality is, if you add a Dylan Larkin, if Pavel Zacha is still around, you have to fit Lindholm in somewhere. He's, a center. He can win faceoffs. He's defensively responsible. You could put him out there in key faceoff defensive zone situations. But adding Larkin's full ice game as well as his offensive output would really elevate the ceiling of this team. Does it make them a Stanley Cup contender? Probably not. But don't forget, this was only one of 8 teams to get 100 points last season. They had a top 10 offense. And if you can add a player like Dylan Larkin to the mix and keep Pavel Zacha for at least one more season, you could be cooking here. And I think people are still, once again, underrating this team heading into this season. We're going to talk about it more as the season approaches, but Stanley Cup odds are not in their favor. Over-under projections, not in their favor. But I think this team could surprise once again. And if you add a guy like Dylan Larkin, then there's no doubt in my mind that they're at least a playoff team with the possibility of winning a round or two in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Dylan Larkin is that good. He is a guy who could seriously change the trajectory of this team, and adding him alongside David Pastrnak, along with Team USA teammates in Charlie McAvoy and Jeremy Swayman, would really help him as well as this team. He's going for Florida or Dallas or Minnesota, but I don't see why Boston can't be that team either on his list. If Don Sweeney can get into his ear, talk to his agent, I think he could convince him to make the jump over to Boston, and then it would just be figuring out the package in return. I don't want to trade a bunch of first-round picks as well as Fraser Minten. I would be fine trading Pavel Zacha. I'd prefer Casey Middlestadt, obviously, but you're going to have to pay to get a guy like Larkin, and I'm more than willing to do it without sacrificing the guys that are already around in the mix, like Hagens, obviously, and Fraser Minten. Adam Proteau did float a few other options. We'll take a look at those here as the podcast continues. So in this Dylan Larkin piece, Adam Proteau also floated a few other names, but very unlikely that a couple would be coming to Boston. First, he mentions Will Smith of the San Jose Sharks, who played at Boston College. He floated an offer sheet or trade scenario, massive long shot, but yes, an intriguing local angle. He also mentioned Adam Fantilli, who's a dynamic restricted free agent. Putting together an offer sheet or trade requires massive roster and salary gymnastics that the Bruins probably aren't willing to go through that routine. He also mentioned William Karlsson of the Vegas Golden Knights, who, in my mind, not really an upgrade over Pavel Zacha. He is, how old is he already? He's just not fitting the profile for the Boston Bruins right now. He's 33 years old, so he's older than Pavel Zacha. He's coming off a season in which he played in only 14 games, only 53 games the season prior to that. He did have a 78-point season in the first year for Vegas, but diminishing returns pretty much since. He did have a 30-30 season in 2023-24, but that's not a guy that I'd be targeting considering his age and his physical history over the last couple of years. Now, it is noted by Tony Ferrari of the Hockey News that James Hagens is, of course, the top talent in Boston's pipeline, but relying on him to immediately solve the number one center slot is a gamble and probably not something that the Bruins are going to do. In fact, it's probably more likely that they would make him the number one center in Providence this season before they put him up there for the Boston Bruins. If Don Sweeney stands pat with Pavel Zacha, Elias Lindholm, Casey Middlestadt, is that enough to stay top four in the Atlantic under Marco Sturm? Or should they pull out all the stops for a true needle mover like Dylan Larkin? Again, your current center spine is Zacha, Elias Lindholm, Fraser Minten, Sean Kuraly, with Casey Middlestadt capable of playing down the middle, James Hagens as well. Murat Husnudinov has center experience as well. They have current $5.3 million in cap space with an AAV of 8.7 to absorb. So that's at least $3.4 million that the Bruins would have to make space for to absorb. They do have 4 first-round picks over the next 3 drafts. It's yet unclear whether the Leafs pick will be 2027 or 2028 because they have to work out the conditions for trading a first-round pick to the Philadelphia Flyers for Scott Lawton. The Bruins did finish 4th in the Atlantic last season with 100 points, but that's with the Toronto Maple Leafs and Florida Panthers having down seasons, and they are both primed for rebounds here in 2026-2027. The Bruins did already make a huge splash by acquiring JJ Peterka from Utah. Look, ultimately, if Don Sweeney and the Boston Bruins want to transition from a solid 100-point playoff team that's in jeopardy of regressing down to the retool stage that they were in a couple of years ago into a legitimate Stanley Cup contender under Marco Sturm, solving the center position is non-negotiable. In order to maximize the primes of David Pastrnak, Jeremy Swayman, Charlie McAvoy, swapping future draft picks and young pieces like a Matt Patra, a Mason Lohrei, not Fraser Minten, ideally, for a Dylan Larkin is a steep price, but it immediately gives Boston the top line engine, elite speed, and two-way presence needed to secure a top 3 spot in a relentless Atlantic division. Standing pat with Zacha, Lindholm, Minten might get you into the postseason, but acquiring a true number 1 center in his prime is the exact bold move that raises the Bruins' ceiling from a wildcard team, maybe a tough playoff out in the first round, to Eastern Conference high-end team. So what do you think, Bruins fans? Would you pull the trigger on a blockbuster for Larkin or hold on to those picks? Trust James Hagens for the future? Let me know in the comments and on social at Locked NHL Bruins. For me, I'm fine trading Pavel Zacha for a Dylan Larkin because chances are you're going to be paying Zacha more than Larkin come next season under a contract extension, and you're not getting the same level of player as Larkin. So do you want to be paying Pavel Zacha more than Dylan Larkin and not getting a player who has the ceiling of a Dylan Larkin, essentially? The question is, would the Red Wings settle for Casey Middlestadt? If you're trading Middlestadt, you're going to have to up your kind of prospect haul or draft pick haul. Or do you include Zacha, a couple first round picks, and then content with throwing in a Matt Patra and maybe a second round pick as a sweetener? I would prefer that to trading Casey Middlestadt and having to deal a Fraser Minten in this package. If you can get Larkin while maintaining Fraser Minten, James Hagens, even if it costs you a couple first round picks over the next couple of years, that's doing what you can to maximize the primes of David Pastrnak and Charlie McAvoy, Jeremy Swayman, but still preserving the future because you have Minten, Hagens, who are still far from their primes, like 4 or 5, maybe even 6 years. So you can still have the best of both here in this Dylan Larkin trade. And I say Don Sweeney should get on the horn, pursue it, and do whatever it takes within reason to acquire a guy like Dylan Larkin. Thank you so much for making Locked On Boston Bruins your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NHL podcast. There's no offseason around here. We're bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter most with local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please do take care of yourselves, friends. Take care of each other. Have a great weekend. And we will talk to you here again on the next episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, your favorite team every single day. I might use this. Can I?